Now, before the hate comments pour in, I want to say that I have all the respect in the world for editors. In a perfect world, the publication of a novel should be a collaborative endeavor, and I'll never presume that I could make my book as good as it could be on my own. Outside feedback is irreplaceable, and for many manuscripts, essential. That said, we need to talk about the elephant in the room: the cost. If you've done any amount of research, you'll know that hiring an editor for your novel can cost you $1,000 plus. And that's before you break down the types of editing. Taken together with cover design, marketing, and if you're in the US, an ISBN, you're looking at the cost of a used car for one book. Every article I've read has said that writers must have an editor, at least if they want their books to sell, and most of those authors mean well. However, these articles ignore the fact that most self-published authors don't have that kind of money, or if we do, we could put ourselves at risk by spending it, because that money comprises our savings account. Telling people to blow their emergency money feels irresponsible, especially when it's unlikely they'll earn even half of it back. Worse, there's this idea that you're a shitty writer and that your book is guaranteed to be crap because you didn't hire an editor. Ergo, if you're a lower income writer who can't afford one, your writing sucks. Ouch. I've written 7 rough drafts thus far, but have published none of them. Why? Because I can't afford an editor, and I've been told that my books will be garbage without them. Now, I want to reiterate that editors have value, and they can go a long way towards making a mediocre book good, and a good book exceptional. That said, if your manuscript is already good, does it need to be brilliant? I don't want to release a book I know could be better without outside input, but is not releasing my book at all because I can't afford an editor better? If I already know my book will be a financial flop, is it practical to spend money I don't have to satisfy my ego? The fact is, I'd rather release a good book that could have been great than never release one at all, at least in the long run. For the time being, I'm holding off on publishing because my long-term goal is to monetize this YouTube channel so that it can pay for an editor. But that's a big if. I have a lot of patience, and you should never rush for the sake of rushing. If the same book can be released 10 years from now, I'm willing to wait. However, this is assuming my channel ever reaches monetization. It could take me as long as 4 years to monetize this channel, and another 3 after that to make a living wage. As such, it will take me years to save for one book, and by then I could be on book 20. Moreover, as my responsibilities increase, what little money I do make from this channel might have to be funneled to other things, like bills or college funds. Ultimately, I've decided that I want to publish my books for the satisfaction of doing so, more than from a desire to earn money from them. And while I'm happy to wait for the next 5 years to give my books a chance at quality, I know that I can't wait forever. I'm not a vampire. In thinking this over, I've concluded there are at least 4 reasons you should forgo hiring an editor. Before we dive in, I'm Riley and this is Otherworldly Fiction. Here I discuss books and writing, and if you want more videos like this, I'd love it if you could subscribe. Every subscriber I get brings me closer to being able to edit my books. Reason number 1. Most books won't break even. It's not if your book flops. It's when. It's a harsh reality, but the truth is that your book, edited or not, probably won't make much money. It certainly won't provide you with a living wage. And if you've invested $2,000 into an editor, you'll be lucky to earn half of that back within the next few years. If you release multiple books and they earn you $500 collectively, that's not going to do much good if you've spent $20,000 on editors, or the cost to publish 10 books. When you look at it that way, hiring an editor isn't practical. Authors who do hire editors do so with the belief that an editor will make their book sellable. But there are traditionally published books, all professionally edited, which fail to sell every day. For every Sarah J. Maas, there's hundreds of traditionally published authors who can't even make minimum wage. That's crushing. You know what's more crushing though? Failing to have readers engage with your book and being $2,000 in the hole. If your traditional book flops, that stings, but at least you haven't bet your retirement savings on the outcome. In some cases, an editor might allow you to sell more copies. Instead of earning $100, you might earn $500 because your book is that much better written, but you'll still be $1,500 in the hole. In other words, if you'd released your book unedited and only earned $100, you'd have made more money. These aren't exact figures, but I'm sure you get the principle. Even if you do have the money, that kind of investment isn't necessarily a sound one, especially if you plan to write multiple books. It makes more sense if you only want to write one great novel to satisfy your dreams. But the majority of us usually have several projects on the go. The next reason is that some books sell without them. This might sound scandalous, but it's true. Books that haven't been edited have made money. Hell, books that have been edited but read like they haven't have sold millions of copies because they still appealed to a subset of readers. The Zodiac Academy books read like they're fresh from Wattpad, and yet readers adore them. In fact, there are books on Wattpad which have received healthy readerships, publishing contracts, and even movie deals. Your book doesn't have to be highbrow literature to sell. It just has to be entertaining, which is a skill in itself. If you're writing a shifter romance or a YA romantasy, that book has the potential to do well, even if more experienced readers might bemoan your seeming lack of a line editor. On the flip side, if you release a literary work full of shifting viewpoints that use flowers as a metaphor for misogyny, the book is going to struggle. It might be Pulitzer worthy, but it's going to be an uphill battle to market it and persuade readers with broader tastes to pick it up. In other words, if your book is in a popular niche, it could excel even if it's mediocre. And if it's in an unpopular niche, it won't sell, making any money invested in it impractical from a business standpoint. Now, if you have the money, I won't talk you out of getting an editor. In fact, I think you should have one, especially if you are aiming to write the next literary masterpiece. All I'm saying is that for most of us, that kind of money is a luxury we don't have, which forces us to face the facts. Our books probably won't make that money back, making investment in an editor a big risk financially. Reason number 3, gatekeeping lower income authors. The wealth gap is only widening. Young adults used to be people with families and cars. Now we live with our parents and make minimum wage as cashiers. We don't have an excess of disposable income. And what little money we do have either needs to go towards rent or purchasing those small luxuries which keep us sane. In theory, I could give up my extras. I could sacrifice all my tips, any additional cash, and invest them in my book. But that would mean going 2 years without buying anything for myself. That would be 2 years or more without trips to the movie theater, new clothes, or luxuries of any kind. I don't spend excessively, but I need those things. I won't die without them, but I'd be pretty miserable. Plus, it's not going to help my writing if I can't read. If I was to be so self-sacrificing for 2 years, it also wouldn't solve the bigger problem, that I have several books rather than one I want to release. When it comes to it, I've learned to be cautious with my money. I might buy the odd luxury here and there, but it's never outside my means. I have $2,000 in my account I avoid touching, just in case I don't make rent this month. And I feel guilty when I do spend money, even if it's on something I need for this channel, like a quality microphone. I grew up watching my parents struggle. We never went without essentials like food or shelter, and there were always Christmas presents under the tree. But I was told repeatedly by my parents that we didn't have the money. What impacted me was seeing how stressed my parents were. I saw my mom beat herself up for spending $5 on a pair of earrings. And there was this constant underlying tension as my parents worked excessive hours to keep the lights on. My mother opened a bakery, the biggest investment you can make, borrowing money against the house. And she's the most talented chef I know. Her food, in my opinion, is without comparison. Even Gordon Ramsay messaged her to say it looked good, and those who tasted it said it was the best food they'd ever had. Despite that, my parents had to shut the business down. They were able to regain what they'd put into it, but after 10 years of backbreaking labor, there was no profit. All this to say that I never want to be in the same position. My parents invested thousands of dollars into their dream, but even with talent, there was no guarantee. On a practical level, I want to be financially secure. I don't want my kids to be worried the internet is going to be cut off, or feel guilty because they want to go on a school field trip. I'm not poor, and I'm grateful for everything that I have. I don't want this to sound like I was deprived, because it was the opposite. My parents spoiled me, and they've placed me in a position of privilege because I can do a job that gives me the space to create videos. Nevertheless, I have to be careful. From a technical standpoint, I fall into that lower income bracket, regardless of how privileged I feel, making hiring an editor a luxury. For the cost of editing 10 novels, I could get a swimming pool. For the cost of 5 novels, I could get a used car. Many people, especially today, are lucky if they can afford the used car. And so making them feel like they can't publish their books or shouldn't because they can't afford an editor rubs me the wrong way. Intentional or not, it's gatekeeping for lower income authors. When you say we must have an editor or our books aren't worthwhile, you're essentially saying that those of lesser means are better off shoving their work in a drawer. Unless we're middle class, what we have to say isn't worth hearing. It's not meant that way, but that's how it can feel, especially if the advice comes from a 6-figure earner. Number 4, traditional deals will provide them for you. This might seem obvious, but the whole point of going with a traditional publisher is so that you don't have to pay for everything. You relinquish creative control, and you still have to do all your own marketing. But a traditional publisher will take care of the headaches. They'll format your book, design a cover, and most importantly, hire an editor who will hopefully become a cherished collaborator and friend, worthy of being extolled in your emotional foreword. Unfortunately, many writers feel that they must hire an editor before they submit to a publisher, so as to have the best possible book to sell. But this is backwards, because publishers aren't looking for perfect manuscripts. They're looking for manuscripts with the potential to be entertaining and profitable, which isn't the same thing. You could have the best written book in the world, but if it's not marketable, it's going to end up on the slush pile. Conversely, you can have a book that's full of awkward sentences and cliches, but if it takes place at a magic school and centers on 3 gorgeous love interests with shape-shifting abilities, it will be the potential for dollar signs that leap out to the publisher, not the beautifully constructed prose. You don't want to spend $2,000 on a book just to be told your idea is too niche to sell. At that point, you might as well self-publish. On the other hand, many writers don't want the hassle of self-publishing, and that's valid. But if you plan to submit to publishers, you have to think more seriously about having high concept ideas, ones which will stand out even without an editor's touch. You'll still want to get feedback, of course, because a book that's a dumpster fire of typos and run-on sentences will turn anyone off, no matter how compelling the premise. But your goal in submitting a manuscript should be to have a clean draft with a great hook. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to sound like Shakespeare. It just has to be readable. The real polishing will come later, when your book has been accepted and you've been assigned an editor at no cost to yourself. Ultimately, editors have value, if you can afford them. However, they're a luxury beyond the means of many, if not most, authors, and there are any number of valid reasons why you might choose not to hire one. I can appreciate the work that artists do, for example, while still accepting that I'm priced out of supporting them, and I extend the same courtesy to editors. They work hard to champion books and improve them, and I'd be honored to work with one. But I've had to accept that such a collaboration may be outside my means, whether because it's financially impossible or simply impractical. Hiring an editor might not be the best course for every author. Six-figure earners with glossy blogs will tell you that you must have an editor to be taken seriously. But if you wait too long, your perfectionism could keep you from publishing anything at all. And to me, that's the greater tragedy. Of course, I'm a huge advocate for beta readers. While there are paid beta readers out there, most will be happy to proofread your book for free. A beta reader can't replace an editor, but they're sure as hell better than nothing. And a beta reader in your niche could directly represent someone from the target audience you hope to reach. If a reader comes away from your book with a few notes, but an ultimate declaration of love for your work, then haven't you technically done your job? If your book was funny, emotional, and earned mostly positive reviews, then I'd argue that you're a valid writer, even if you couldn't afford an editor. One commenter I came across on Reddit noted that he had published books without editing them before, and 8 out of 10 reviews were positive. Sure, he got a few notes that could have been avoided if he'd hired an editor. But considering literally no book on Goodreads is 5 stars, his books were great as is. At least, I think so. Whether you want to spend $2,500 to gain an extra 10% on your reviews is a decision only you can make. The commenter in question regretted not hiring an editor, though his books were, by all accounts, doing well. And I can't speak for what's best for you or your book. Of course, this is all moot if you haven't finished a rough draft. For many writers, the greatest challenge is simply finishing the story, whether that's due to a lack of inspiration or a lack of time. It can be challenging to finish a draft, especially if you have writer's block or a high number of responsibilities. As such, if you're struggling to have a book to edit in the first place, click either of the videos on screen, where I break down how you can find inspiration and keep yourself motivated. Thank you for watching, and happy writing!